Thank you so much for inviting me. My apologies, I'm not able to be there in person, but I'm glad these digital technologies allow us to connect. And I think my talk is a very good follow to Jiping's talking about some of the technical aspects. There's been tremendous progress there. And I'm going to talk about some of the implications for the economy and the future of work, which I believe will be quite dramatic. I believe the coming decade is going to be one of the most momentous ones because of what we're seeing in generative AI and the digital economy more broadly. One way to see some of these changes is if just looking at what's happened in terms of progress in different categories. And I'm on the steering committee of a group called the AI Index, where we track a lot of these different metrics. For instance, we just heard a little bit about image recognition and vision recognition. And here's the progress in that on the right chart in terms of more and more accuracy from the machine learning systems on the ImageNet data set that my Stanford colleague Fei Li put together some years ago. You can see the jump around 2012 when Geoff Hinton introduced deep learning techniques, which we heard a little bit about just there. And very quickly, the rest of the field switched over to that approach. And since then, we've seen progress, in this case, matching or exceeding human capabilities and vision, but also in so many other categories, too many to list. And this is part of the machine learning or the deep learning revolution. More recently, as we just heard, we're seeing breakthroughs in foundation models. I was a co-author on that paper that was mentioned about the opportunities and risks of foundation models, and there are an explosion of different companies using these technologies to not only for chat GPT and large language models, but also for creating images, for video, for audio, code, and so many other things. The results are getting near human level in many ways. Here's some charts from a paper by a team at Microsoft looking at the progress of GPT-3 or 3.5, which is the blue bars, versus GPT-4, which is the green bars. And you can see that it very rapidly improved in many different categories, being able to solve questions on the calculus exam, the far left there, the uniform bar exam that went from less than 10% to over 90%. That is the law exam that's given in most states in the United States, and a lot of progress in other areas. Still not progress across the board. We don't have artificial general intelligence, but we do have, as an economist, a great deal of capability, I would say, to solve many domains in law, medicine, finance, marketing, and even teaching. So this is some important progress. Now, what are the implications for the future of work? Let me spend the rest of the talk talking about that. One big fear is it's going to lead to the end of work. And it's probably the most common prediction I'm hearing, or the concern that people have, is that there's going to be mass unemployment or other issues like that. Even Geoff Hinton, he is in 2016, about 7 years ago, predicting that because machine learning systems would be so good and would be able to surpass humans in reading radiology images, that we would have no more need for human radiologists. These are people who read X-rays and other medical images. And whether it be 5 years or 10 years, he thought that the game was over for that category of employment, following on what I just showed you with the vision, which of course applies also to medical images. As it turns out, if anything, we have more radiologists now than when he said that 7 years ago. There's still a couple of years left to go before the end of his prediction, but it's looking right now like the demand for radiologists is quite strong. And that might be a bit of a mystery, given that I do think that he was correct about the technological capabilities. But I'm an economist, so let's look at this from an economist perspective. And one of the things that we did around the same time was write a series of papers trying to understand what the implications of machine learning would be for the workforce in science and the American Economic Association and other locations, with Tom Mitchell, who's the head of machine learning at Carnegie Mellon University, with Daniel Rock, who was a student of mine at MIT, but he's now a professor at the University of Pennsylvania at Wharton. One of the things we did was we looked at approximately 18,000 occupational specific tasks across 950 occupations from the ONET data set. So we went through each of these specific tasks, and for every single one of them, we evaluated them with an analysis to estimate how well machine learning could do that particular skill. Now, as you know, machine learning, I showed you earlier, is very good at some skills, but it's very bad at other skills. It can help read medical images, but it's not very good at walking upstairs or making a cupcake. So there are some things that are easier and some things that are difficult. We rated all of the different ones based on a set of 25 different criteria. And then we had multiple people rate them. So we got some sense of what could be done. And to give you a little bit of an example, let's go back to radiologists, the medical doctors that look at medical images. One of the important things they do is number 4 there is they read medical images to help make diagnoses. However, there are actually 27 distinct tasks that radiologists do, not just one. They also provide advice to patients. They conduct physical exams. They may administer conscious sedation, as is marked in blue there. They may consult with other doctors. And for many of these other tasks, machine learning is not good at all. In fact, it might be kind of dumb to use them for those. And one of the reasons that we continue to see demand for radiologists is that even though one part of their job can be done helpfully with the machines, there are many other parts that can't. And this pattern that I'm showing you for radiology was very similar for almost all of the other 950 occupations that we looked at. In almost all of them, we found that there were some tasks that machine learning could help with, but also in all of them, there was not a single one of them where machine learning could do everything. In all of them, there were some tasks that humans were still better at. And the lesson I take from that is that rather than mass unemployment, what we're going to see is a massive realignment or restructuring of work. So there'll be a lot of disruption as parts of jobs get rearranged, and the people who are doing them will have to change the kinds of things that they focus on, and their managers may rearrange the way tasks are bundled together. But it's going to be more of a rearrangement than a complete elimination of categories of jobs. Now, that said, some jobs will be much more affected than others, and the disruption will not be even. In this diagram, each of the red dots there is one of the 950 occupations. To the right are the occupations with higher wages up to the 100th percentile. The left have lower wages. And on the vertical dimension is our estimate of how much machine learning is likely to affect the job. The ones towards the top will be affected more. So you can see from this pattern that there are all sorts of jobs that are going to be affected. There is a somewhat of a downward slope. That is to say, the higher paying jobs will be somewhat less affected than the lower paying jobs, but almost all jobs will be affected. To give you a sense of what I mean, cashiers, people who check people out at the supermarket or stores, are among the highest likelihood of being affected. They also have relatively low wages. So that's one example. But there are also people like airline pilots that have fairly high wages that also have fairly high likelihood of disrupting, at least above average. I know many of you are economists, so I've had to show you where the economists are. Higher wages than most, and actually a little below average in terms of likelihood of disruption. Now, this is our analysis using traditional machine learning. We did this a few years ago. As we just heard, there's a new wave of machine learning, generative AI, large language models, foundation models that are affecting many new categories. They have new sets of capabilities. And Daniel Rock, my former student, and some of the other folks at OpenAI and at Wharton did an analysis similar to what I just showed you, but this time using only the new generative AI, not the traditional machine learning. I hate to call it traditional since it's really not that old, but the pattern here is, again, like the previous chart, showing you the wage on the horizontal axis, and the vertical axis is how likely it is to be affected. But now the pattern is different. We see that if anything, higher wage occupations are more likely to be affected. So that it's sort of upward sloping now. The low wage occupations are less likely to be affected. So to be more concrete, jobs like a lawyer, doctor, financial professional, they tend to be towards the middle or right hand, the upper side of the wage distribution. And you can see that they're affected quite a bit compared to others. And so this is a new pattern that we saw before. And I expect that as the technology continues to progress, a much broader set of individuals are going to be affected. In fact, I estimate about 60% of the American workforce primarily do information and knowledge work, and they will be significantly affected. And that percentage is not that different in places like China or in Europe. So a big percentage of the workforce is likely to be affected by these technologies. Now, to be clear, I'm saying affected, not automated, because in some cases, in many cases, the technology is going to augment their work and allow them to be more productive, and it may even lead to greater employment. So it's not necessarily the same as reducing work. To give you some more concrete analysis of this, here's some data from a paper that I recently finished with Lindsay Raymond, another PhD student at MIT, and Danielle Lee, a professor at MIT. The three of us worked together, and we looked at data from a call center, a contact center, where people would call in to get advice on how to repair different problems they were having. And it was a natural experiment in that this company rolled out a large language model system to help some of the workers, but not other workers. So we could compare the workers who had access to the technology to those who did not have access to the technology. And there was quite a significant difference. You see here that on the top one, after they had AI, the ability to solve problems went up quite a bit. They were able to solve more questions per hour. The blue area shifted to the right of the pre-AI area. Similarly, the amount of time it took to solve problems, the lower left there, that went down. They were able to solve them more quickly, and they were able to do more chats per hour. We also, in the paper, you'll see, we also found that the customer sentiment went up. We looked at the transcripts, millions of transcripts, and we found that the customers were more likely to use happy, joyful words and less likely to use angry or sad words. So there was a big improvement in customer sentiment. And finally, we also found that the employees themselves seemed to be happier. They were less likely to quit. They stayed longer when they were using the system than when they were not using the system. So everyone benefited. The company benefited, the customers benefited, the employees benefited. It was a big win. But some benefited more. The employees who got the biggest productivity gain were the least experienced employees. They had about a 35% increase in performance, while the average employee only had about a 14% increase in performance. So this was a technology that mostly leveraged the less skilled workers in this particular case. I would say it's universal, but it is interesting, the pattern that we saw. A big part of that was because these technologies have been capturing some of the tacit knowledge from the more skilled workers and allowing the less skilled workers to use that knowledge to solve the problems more effectively. That's the essence of machine learning, is being able to capture that tacit knowledge without being explicitly instructed. Now, you can take this not only from the individual, but also roll it up to the company level. And a company that I found is called WorkHelix that does this at scale. What we do is we look at companies and we look at all of the tasks they're doing, and we do an analysis of how many of those tasks in the company are likely to be affected by machine learning or by generative AI. And on the right chart, I won't go through both of these, but look at the scatter plot on the right. Each of the dots there, the black dots, the green dots, the red dot, those are different companies, publicly traded companies in the United States in our data set. The red dot is Walmart. I can disclose that. We've been talking to them. And what you see is that the red dot is somewhat to the right of the other dots. That means that Walmart has more employees who have high AI skills. So they actually are, compared to many of the other companies in the US economy, have more skilled AI engineers. It's also, the red dot is also somewhat above average. It's higher than most of the dots on the vertical axis. And that reflects the fact that Walmart as a company has more tasks that are suitable for machine learning than most others. For instance, they have a lot of cashiers and they have a lot of other people who could potentially have machine learning affect their jobs. And we can do this for every company in the country by using our techniques. You can also drill down and look at individual tasks. So here we have the tasks that an infrastructure engineer is doing, relatively hard to replace. and we see how many of their tasks are automatable, how many of them are remotable, how many of them are required by using this framework. So let me just sum up and say that what I see, as I said at the beginning, is that we have a real grand challenge in the United States and China and around the world, which is to take advantage of these digital technologies, especially machine learning and generative AI. They are not only accelerating, but I think the evidence is they're going to continue to accelerate. I've never seen a technology advance as rapidly as what I've seen over the past year or two with foundation models. And everything suggests that we're going to have a massive acceleration. On the other hand, our skills, our organizations, our institutions, even our measurements are not keeping up. So the technology is advancing exponentially, but our ability to adapt is not changing very fast at all. And that means that we have a problem. There's a bigger and bigger gap between what the technology can do and our ability to adjust to it. The employment that doesn't have the right workforce, it doesn't have the right skills. Our business processes are out of state, and our metrics aren't what they should be. We need to close that gap. Some suggest that we need to slow down the technology. That's not my approach. I would recommend speeding up our adaptation and learning more as an economist, as a business researcher, as a manager, learning more about how we can make the adjustments to keep up with the technology. And that's one of the reasons we're trying to reinvent our skills in our organizations at the Digital Economy Lab. And I'm very glad to have the chance to share a little bit of this research with all of you. And I hope you will also join my mission to speed up our adaptation, speed up our understanding of the digital economy, so we'll be able to catch up with the ever accelerating digital technologies that we see around us. Thanks very much.